The complex legacy of Southside Watts' Varrio Grape Street. A history of transformation, alliances, and rivalries. The Southside Watts Varrio Grape 13, SSWVG, is more than just a gang. It represents the intertwined history of Black and Latino communities in South Los Angeles. Born from the multiracial dynamics of the Watts neighborhood and centered around the Jordan Downs projects, SSWVG has evolved into a force deeply rooted in both the Mexican-American experience and the broader landscape of Southern California gang culture. What began as a shared front against external threats has transformed over time, reshaping alliances, rivalries, and the very fabric of the Watts community. A story of transformation. From Watts Varrio Grape to Southside Watts Varrio Grape 13. In the early 1970s, the Watts Varrio Grape Gang was known for its racial diversity, bringing together Black and Mexican-American members under a single banner. This unique bond was a reflection of the shared struggles in Watts, a neighborhood defined by socio-economic challenges and racial tensions. For many years, the Watts Varrio Grape stood united, fiercely protecting their territory. By 1973, however, a pivotal shift occurred. The influence of the Mexican Mafia, or La Mafia, began to ripple through Latino gangs in Southern California. This external pressure led the Latino members of Watts Varrio Grape to realign their loyalties, breaking away from their Black counterparts. Meanwhile, the Black members of the gang, under the leadership of Pee Wee, formed a new faction called the Jordan Down Crips, which would eventually become the Grape Street Watts Crips under the guidance of Kenneth Crow Day. The Latino members, now part of the Serranos network under the Mexican Mafia, rebranded as the Southside Watts Varrio Grape 13, SSWVG, adopting the number 13 as a symbol of their allegiance. Yet, even as these two factions took separate paths, a unique bond remained. The Southside Watts Varrio Grape 13 and the Grape Street Watts Crips, despite affiliating with rival networks, maintained an alliance based on their shared history and geographical roots. Both gangs adopted the color purple, symbolizing their connection to Grape Street, and to this day, their members are recognized more by this color than by the traditional blue associated with Crips and Serranos. Key players and Mexican Mafia ties. Over the years, several influential members of the Southside Watts Varrio Grape 13 gained prominence, even earning membership in the Mexican Mafia. Among these were Ronald Berry, known as Aro or Rollo, and Alvaro Peña, known as Joker. These individuals played key roles in connecting the gang to larger criminal networks and enhancing their influence within the Serrano structure. While there may be more SSWVG members tied to the Mexican Mafia, Berry and Peña stand out as pivotal figures who helped shape the gang's future. Southside Watts Varrio Grape Street. The legacy of Ronald, Rollo, Berry and his Mexican Mafia ties. In 2000, Ronald Alfred Berry, known as Rollo and a high-ranking member of the Mexican Mafia, MAFIA, was sentenced to life under California's three strikes law. At 54 years old, Berry was convicted for possessing a fraudulent check and a forged driver's license, but his deep criminal history and connections to the Mexican Mafia painted a much more dangerous picture. Despite pleading guilty to lesser charges, his involvement in serious felonies, including the possession of firearms and drugs, led to his harsh sentencing. A life of crime and influence. Berry's criminal record was extensive, dating back to 1964. His long list of offenses, including bank robberies and drug-related crimes, was intertwined with his role in the Mexican Mafia. This powerful prison gang, founded in 1957, operates both inside and outside of correctional facilities, using younger gang members, known as Serranos, as soldiers to carry out its commands. Berry was no ordinary member. His status within the organization allowed him to command respect and loyalty from gang members, both in prison and on the streets. During his time in prison, Berry's influence was undeniable. He was caught issuing orders to Mexican Mafia associates through coded messages and was implicated in organizing criminal activities from behind bars. His ability to lead, even while incarcerated, showcased his dangerous reach. According to experts, Berry's presence in prison transformed the atmosphere, as inmates began to act in a more structured and organized manner under his guidance. Failed attempts at redemption. Despite claiming a desire to live a crime-free life and spend time with his family, Berry's actions contradicted his words. His continued involvement in gang activities, even after being sentenced, demonstrated his unyielding loyalty to the Mexican Mafia. Multiple expert witnesses testified to the danger Berry posed, citing his ability to command criminal acts without direct involvement. His power to influence and intimidate others remained intact, even as he aged. In 2012, when the Three Strikes Law was amended, Berry sought to have his life sentence recalled, but his petition was denied. The court concluded that Berry, with his long-standing ties to the Mexican Mafia, still posed a significant threat to public safety. His appeal, based on the argument that his actions in prison did not establish him as a danger, was rejected. The court stood firm, recognizing the ongoing risk Berry represented, both inside and outside prison walls. A legacy of power and control. Berry's story is a stark reminder of the enduring influence of prison gangs like the Mexican Mafia. Even after decades of incarceration, figures like Rollo maintain control over their criminal enterprises, shaping the lives of younger gang members and continuing to fuel violence and crime in society. His story, intertwined with Southside Watts' Varrio Grape Street, reflects the deep roots and far-reaching impact of organized crime in California's gang culture. While Berry's life behind bars continues, his legacy as a high-ranking Mexican Mafia member remains a powerful testament to the dangerous allure and long-lasting influence of gangs like the Southside Watts' Varrio Grape Street and the Mexican Mafia. The court's decision was meticulously grounded in both legal precedent and the evidence presented. It underscored Berry's extensive criminal history, tracing back to 1964, which, while detailed in earlier appeals, highlighted a concerning pattern of criminal activity involving firearms and knives. The court remarked that Berry's tendency to re-offend upon release was unmistakable. Of significant concern was Berry's affiliation with the Mexican Mafia prison gang, with compelling evidence pointing to his active role within the organization. The court cited numerous records illustrating his influence as a senior member of the gang, orchestrating illegal activities from within the prison system. Berry's ability to command subordinates and issue orders, even while incarcerated, was seen as an indicator of his continued danger to others. His prison record revealed rule violations tied to gang-related activities, demonstrating sophisticated and coordinated efforts to perpetuate criminal conduct. The court was convinced that Berry, even at his advanced age, continued to wield considerable power as a shot caller within the prison system, controlling illicit operations with the protection of layers of subordinates who executed his directives. The court made it clear that Berry's insulation from the direct execution of crimes did not absolve him of culpability, and his gang-related activities would likely persist well beyond any potential release. Testimonies offered in Berry's defense were deemed unconvincing. The court found that Canales' testimony lacked credibility, and Vasquez's testimony, despite his decades of experience, was dismissed as speculative and outdated. In contrast, testimony from Rodriguez, corroborated by other expert witnesses, was found to be far more reliable and compelling. In conclusion, the court held that Berry's long criminal record and history of incarceration demonstrated a lack of rehabilitation, with no realistic prospect of him living a lawful life upon release. Despite attempts to present him as an elderly man looking for a peaceful retirement, the court determined that Berry remained deeply entrenched in gang-related criminal activity and posed a significant, ongoing threat to public safety. The court ruled that the prosecution had sufficiently proven Berry's continued danger, and his petition for resentencing was denied. This ruling exemplifies the careful balance courts must strike between rehabilitation and public safety, with the decision here being grounded in the overwhelming evidence of Berry's ongoing involvement in dangerous, gang-related activities. Rivalries and bloodshed. The battle for Watts. While the alliance between SSWBG and the Grape Street Watts Crips has remained intact, The Southside Watts Varrio Grape 13 is no stranger to violent conflicts with other gangs. One of their most intense rivalries has been with the Fudgetown Mafia Crips, a feud that has spilled over into frequent and deadly violence. One of the most tragic incidents in this ongoing conflict occurred in 2012 when an innocent father was gunned down while holding his child, sparking outrage and leading to the arrest and lengthy imprisonment of the shooter. Beyond their feud with the Fudgetown Mafia Crips, SSWVG has a long list of rivals. Their adversaries include Watts Varrio Elm Street, Watts Ivy Street, Wigan Colonia, Watts 13, Watts Hickory Street, PJ Watts Crips, Hacienda Village Bloods, 10 Line Gangster Crips, Hat Gang Crips, East Coast Crips, 99 Watts Mafia Crips, and Florencia 13. They also face fierce opposition from the Bounty Hunter Bloods from Nickerson Gardens, Circle City Piru, and Roland 60s Neighborhood Crips. The sheer number of enemies highlights the complexity of the gang's position within the ever-evolving power struggles of Los Angeles gangs. Despite these rivalries, the 1992 Watts truce between the Bloods and Crips provided a temporary respite from violence. This truce, though short-lived, demonstrated that peace was possible, even in a neighborhood as deeply entrenched in gang conflict as Watts. It offered a glimpse of hope that, with concerted efforts, even the most bitter rivalries could be eased. Deadly feuds and rivalries. Southside Watts Varrio Grape Street's clashes with Elm Street and Ivy Street gangs. Southside Watts Varrio Grape Street and Elm Street gang violence. The case of Bautista. Bautista's trial stands as a stark example of the harsh realities of gang violence and the legal consequences that follow. He faced a 3-count charge: the murder of Lorena Webb, the attempted murder of Felipe Lopez, and possession of ammunition by a felon. In addition, gang enhancements and firearm allegations added weight to the charges, pointing to a violent cycle of retaliation between rival gangs, Watts Varrio Grape Street and Elm Street. The prosecution's case. The prosecution's strategy focused on proving Bautista's role as an aider and abettor in both the murder and the attempted murder. While no defense witnesses were called, Bautista's recorded conversations and his statements to law enforcement were crucial pieces of evidence. The jury found him guilty of both murder and attempted murder, with first-degree murder convictions and additional sentences for gang and firearm enhancements. The facts presented at trial painted a grim picture. On July 4, 2006, Bautista, a member of the Elm Street gang, joined fellow gang members in a series of violent acts targeting rival gang members. Lorena Webb, tragically caught in the crossfire, was fatally shot that night, while Felipe Lopez, a Florencia gang member, survived an attack shortly after. Though Bautista claimed he did not pull the trigger, his presence and active involvement solidified his culpability. The confession and gang retaliation. Bautista's tape-recorded conversation with Victor Gomez, a fellow Elm Street member, was damning. In that conversation, he bragged about handling members of the Watts Varrio Grape Street gang and discussed the shootings on the 4th of July, referring to the victims as flowers, Florencia gang members, and fakes, a derogatory term for Watts Varrio Grape Street members. This revealed his intent to retaliate for the killing of an Elm Street member by Watts Varrio Grape Street. Further interviews with police revealed Bautista's understanding of the violent nature of his gang's actions. While he claimed he was just a bystander, the jury considered his conduct as assisting in the crimes, a common role in gang missions to elevate status within the group. Gang culture and law enforcement testimony. Expert testimony from law enforcement underscored the brutal reality of gang culture. Being present at shootings, aiding fellow gang members, and escaping afterward are seen as putting in work for the gang, key to building reputation and status. The court found that Bautista's participation in the shootings was a calculated attempt to boost the standing of the Elm Street gang while retaliating against rivals. Sentencing and impact. Bautista was sentenced to 2 consecutive 25-year to life terms for the murder, attempted murder, and firearm enhancement. Additionally, He received concurrent sentences for possession of ammunition and prior felony convictions. His story is a sobering reminder of how deeply entrenched gang rivalries lead to violence and how individuals within these networks face severe legal penalties. This case highlights not only the devastating consequences of gang involvement but also the lengths to which the justice system goes to combat such organized crime. The convictions send a strong message. Participation in gang-related violence, whether as a direct actor or as an accomplice, leads to severe punishment under the law. Southside Watts Varrio Grape Street and Ivy Street rivalry ends in fatal Southgate shooting. In a tragic turn of events during the ongoing gang war between the Ivy Street Watts and the Southside Watts Varrio Grape Street gangs, a deadly shooting in Southgate on August 12, 2003, claimed the life of Hector "Tiny" Medrano. This brutal act of violence was part of a long-standing feud between these rival gangs, drawing attention to the dangerous and destructive path of gang-related conflicts. The incident, a fatal chase. On that fateful day, Alex Ibarra and Juan Rivas, both members of the Ivy Street Watts gang, were driving in Southgate, hunting down members of the opposing Watts Varrio Grape Street gang. Inside a green Pontiac were Hector "Tiny" Medrano, Diego Avendano, and George Zamudio, all affiliated with Grape Street. Medrano was driving, and none of the men in the Pontiac were armed. The rivalry between these two gangs had reached a boiling point. As Ibarra pursued the Pontiac, Rivas repeatedly fired at the vehicle, striking it from behind. Medrano was hit twice in the back, causing the car to crash. In a desperate attempt to survive, Avendano and Zamudio fled the scene on foot. However, Rivas, now out of the car, began to pursue them until Ibarra and another passenger called him back, fleeing the scene together. Medrano's injuries were fatal. He died at the scene, shot in the back by a hail of bullets. Authorities recovered 8.25 caliber bullet casings, and the bullets retrieved from Medrano's body matched the weapon used by Rivas. The crime scene left little doubt about the violent nature of the attack, with 7 bullets striking the vehicle and 1 shattering the rear windshield. The legal battle. An appeal denied. Alex Ibarra's conviction for his role in the murder was ultimately affirmed by the court despite multiple legal challenges. His appeal was based on 3 key arguments. 1. Provocation and jury instruction. Ibarra argued that the trial court failed to instruct the jury with ALJIC number 8.73, which allows for the consideration of provocation to potentially reduce a murder charge from first degree to second degree. Ibarra claimed that Medrano's gang signs during the chase constituted provocation. However, Ibarra's defense throughout the trial was an alibi, asserting that he wasn't present at the crime scene. The court found that there was no substantial evidence to support a provocation claim, as the defense did not present this argument during the trial. As a result, the court was not required to provide this instruction to the jury. 2. Gang-related firearm enhancements. Ibarra also contested the sufficiency of evidence supporting the gang-related firearm enhancements under California Penal Code Section 12022.53, which imposes harsher penalties for crimes committed with firearms in furtherance of gang activity. Ibarra argued that there was no proof he intended to promote or assist in any further criminal conduct by gang members beyond this specific crime. However, the court found overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Ibarra and his fellow Ivy Street Watts gang members had deliberately pursued their rivals, firing at them with intent to kill. A gang expert testified that the shooting directly benefited the Ivy Street Watts gang by asserting dominance over their rivals, affirming that the crime was committed with the intent to further gang-related activity. 3. Cruel and unusual punishment. In a final bid to overturn his sentence, Ibarra argued that the punishment was excessive and amounted to cruel and unusual punishment. Given the violent and calculated nature of the crime, an intentional gang shooting that resulted in a fatality, the court firmly rejected this claim, maintaining that the sentence was appropriate for the gravity of the offense. The outcome: a life defined by violence. Ibarra's conviction and sentence were upheld by the court, marking the end of his legal appeals. His participation in the fatal attack on Hector Medrano was a stark example of the violence that defined the ongoing rivalry between the Ivy Street Watts and Watts Varrio Grape Street gangs. The court found no error in the proceedings, no miscarriage of justice, and no basis to reduce his sentence. His claim of innocence, bolstered by an alibi defense, could not withstand the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecution. This case underscores the devastating consequences of gang violence and the far-reaching impact it has on individuals, families, and communities. The rivalry between the Ivy Street Watts and Southside Watts Varrio Grape Street gangs led to yet another senseless loss of life, and the justice system held those responsible accountable. As gang violence continues to plague neighborhoods, this tragic incident serves as a stark reminder of the urgent need to break the cycle of violence and find pathways to peace. A call to action. The streets of South Gate, Watts, and surrounding areas have long been marked by gang wars, where lives are often tragically cut short. Stories like this are all too common, but they don't have to be. Communities can come together to combat the root causes of gang involvement and offer alternatives to young people caught in this dangerous lifestyle. It's time to focus on prevention, rehabilitation, and providing opportunities that steer individuals away from gangs and toward brighter futures. The structure of Southside Watts Varrio Grape 13, cliques and operations. The Southside Watts Varrio Grape 13 is organized into three primary cliques: Tiny Winos, TWS, Gangster Locos, GLS, and TRS. Each of these cliques plays a specific role within the gang's structure, contributing to their criminal operations, territorial defense, and influence in the community. Their stronghold is centered around 103rd Street and Grape Street, with the Jordan Downs project serving as their base of operations. The gang's presence is deeply felt in the area, with many of its members attending nearby Jordan High School, a reflection of how ingrained the gang has become in the local community. A legacy of resilience, hope amid violence. Despite their violent history, the story of Southside Watts Varrio Grape 13 is one of resilience and community identity. Their origins as a multiracial gang, the lasting alliance with the Grape Street Watts Crips, and their ongoing rivalries have all shaped the gang into what it is today. Yet, beneath the layers of conflict and criminal activity lies the possibility of transformation. The 1992 Watts Truce stands as a testament to what can be achieved when communities work together toward peace. Today, the Southside Watts Varrio Grape 13 continues to be a significant force in Watts. Their story, rich with history, violence, and moments of hope, serves as a reflection of the broader challenges faced by gang-impacted communities in Los Angeles. In a world where alliances shift and rivalries ignite, SSWVG's legacy is a reminder that even in the most tumultuous environments, change is always possible.